just after 17 and a half. All my friends were getting called up for national service, and my friend Dickie Carr and I decided we couldn't wait, so we go running down to the recruiting office and decided we'd volunteer. I volunteered for the Navy and Dickie went in the Air Force. But we didn't realise we weren't going to do national service, it was going to be a long-term contract. So I signed on for 7 and 5 in the Navy, and Dickie went in the Air Force. After signing on, I had to go home and tell my mother and father I was leaving home, which didn't go down very well with my mother, but my father was quite nice about it. And was shipped and went down on a train from Waterloo to Portsmouth, then across to Gosport to a place called HMS St George, which was a based training centre. And anybody that's done basic training will know what square bashing and washing and ironing and climbing and swimming and being sworn at by instructors meant. I was then put back in HMS Victory in Portsmouth. HMS Victory was the Portsmouth shore base for all personnel who were Portsmouth ratings. A very old load of buildings consisting of various blocks, and you were treated as though it was a ship. It had its own quarter deck, it had a wardroom for the officers, it had messes for petty officers and chief petty officers, and you still slept in your hammock. It was treated as a shore-based ship. HMS Crispin was one of destroyers which were part of the 7th Escort Flotilla from the Atlantic convoys, and she was based alongside her sister ship HMS Creole. They were the first destroyers of all welded construction after the American design, and they just creaked and clonked all the time, so they had no rivets, and the forecastle was split from the rest of the ship by folding bulkheads of some sort, and they went up and down. Anyway, they were quite comfortable to go to rough sea in. A lot of time spent in Londonderry, played rugby and cricket and swam a lot, went to sea a lot on exercises with other ships. Alongside Crispin, on the other side of the river, there's a alley, was the dockyard where all the U-boats that surrendered after the war were all brought down the river to scrap, and they laid in, it must have been 20 of them all laying side by side. It's quite a sight to see 20 U-boats all tied up alongside each other. We went into Dublin on a state visit, first naval ship to do this, where I played rugby, spent a whole day or two in Dublin, having a day out in the brewery where they made all the Guinness. We were entertained by the brewery, wonderful. Spent the next day playing rugby against a team, Irish team in Dublin, and which made your head worse after the tour of the thing that we went round the brewery. Then after that I left Crispin and came back into Londonderry and waited for my next ship, HMS Rotherham, which was another destroyer but was being converted and done up for sale through the Indian Navy. I spent 6 months on there while we were rebuilding it, and then it was handed over to the Indian Navy and called HMIS Rajput, and we took it out to sea with the Indian crew, instructed them all about being boiler room. I was then given instructions to them. I had all about the boilers and how to steam it. We had quite a good time on there because we lived with them and we ate all their food. We carried our own chefs, but we didn't like, so we went on the Indian food. Everybody's dream was to go on an overseas commission. Mostly these lasted 2 years, not like today where they don't have overseas commissions, they come and go. You were put somewhere on a ship and you stayed there for at least 2 years. My overseas commission at that time was HMS Wren, a bird class frigate. Of the bird class frigate there was Wren, Wild Goose, Flamingo, and all named after boats, and we were part of the Persian Gulf flotilla, based in Basra, Kuwait and various other places around the Gulf. Quite an interesting trip, because at that time the Gulf wasn't like the modern places today. I mean, Basra and Kuwait were little offshore villages come to what they are now, and the Gulf was quite interesting because there were lots of dotted around with little islands where owned by sheikhs who kept their own castles there and their own harems, and it was like something out of Ali Baba's dream. One of the things that came about during our trip, our time up in the Persian Gulf, was the start of the Iranian-Iraqi war over the oil fields. Iraq said the oil fields were them, and the Iranians said they belonged to them, when they were really allocated to the American Oil Company. But our main job was to go escort Fleet Auxiliary vessel, which was a supply vessel, and they were to take off personnel from the beaches at Kuwait, children and wives and that, because they were going to be battles around the oil fields, which luckily didn't happen, but we were escorting them up there, all the action stations as we went past. We got past and went up the river, turned round at Basra and came back down again. The ship's company would then put up into a rest camp up in Diatalawa in Ceylon, right up in the mountains where near the tea plantations, which during the war was a rest camp for people who'd served in the Far East. I had my 21st birthday up in Diatalawa, which was rather a hectic night out, because they had everything there. They had bar, golf course, tennis. We could do anything we want, walk for miles around the waterfalls, anything like that. So that wasn't a bad commission. A bit hard because it was hot and you got no relief from the heat. My commission on there lasted something like 18 months, I think. But Wren was then itself was decommissioned, and we steamed Wren into Malta, and from Malta we flew home, and we were disbanded then, and I went back to come home and got married, and was allocated with a whole crew, a small crew, which were going to be the first part of it, to a ship called HMS Duchess that was being built down in Southampton. Duchess was one of a group of Daring class destroyers, which were the latest destroyers built for the Navy. There was Daring, Dainty and Duchess, and quite modern, fastest destroyers in the Navy because of the shape of their propellers, etc. But we went down finally at the end of the build, and we were known as the commissioning party, because it was there at Southampton when it was finished that the Countess Mountbatten came down, as Duchess came down to launch HMS Duchess, and after that we then steamed her out on her trials with all the dockyard people on board. We had speed trials, turning trials, our guns were tried out, our torpedo tubes were fired to do the usual run-up for vessels before they were handed over by the dockyard to the Royal Navy. We went on all various trips to the Mediterranean, out and play war games with the Americans in the Arctic, up and down outside Reykjavik in terrible storms, losing one man from overboard. We never saw him again. The Americans refused to come out of Reykjavik to play because it was too rough, so we steamed up and down for about 4 days, called it off and tried to get home. We lost boats off the upper deck. As I say, we lost one man over, and we came back to the UK. We were at Gravesend for the coronation, and we were allowed home. I came home to Richmond, to my mother's, and we all sat and watched the coronation on the television. And the following day, I went back to Gravesend. We were visited then by Lord Mountbatten and Lady Edwina, because Lady Edwina, as I told earlier, was the lady who launched our ship. That's called HMS Duchess. And she presented a cup, all the different jobs in the ship, like the seaman, the electrics, the engine room branch, the upper deck branch. We all had a football match once a year for this cup, and she awarded the cup that year to the seaman's branch. Mountbatten was there. He made some funny speech about falling off a horse down the Mall, and all the rest. It was very, very well done. We all met them, and one of the strangest things that ever came out of that, my friend Ticker Green and I were coming up to London for the 2 days, and we were walking out through the dockyard, and who should pull up in his Rolls Royce was Earl Mountbatten. Wound the window down and asked us where we were going, and we said we're going up to Smoke. He said, well, I'm going up to the Smoke. He said, would you like a lift up there? Well, the last thing you do as an all naval rating is to climb into the Earl Mountbatten's car for a lift home. So we thanked him for it. I said, no, we're going for a pint first. He said, we'll enjoy it, and drove away. My Duchess career ended because that was when I was leaving the Navy. My 7 years were up, and I was then discharged from HMS Victory, came home, had to find a job. I was then on the Fleet Reserve for 5 years. Got a call-up letter from an Admiralty to get ready to go to the Suez Canal if I was called, because that's when the Suez Canal escapade started, but luckily it finished before I had to go. My memories of it all are still wound up because I've been a member of HMS Wren Association, which is an association of Fawnville people who served on HMS Wren. But unfortunately now, because there's not many of us left, only 15 of us left as members now, we had to disband HMS Wren association last year. And that's it, as far as I can remember.